This is Dr. Chris's Radio Horror Show here at WCW. If you're not listening to this recorded interview when it broadcasts live alongside the Hellraiser Bloodlines music, hopefully you can catch it out on the WCW.archive site or on the YouTube channel with a slideshow of all the various works that Peter has worked on. Tonight on the show with us is the screenwriter for Hellraiser 2, 3, and 4, as well as the Wishmaster films. We have Peter Atkins on the show with us. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Peter.
Well, thank you very much for the invite, Chris. It's great to be here. Thanks.
I saw that book, and I heard about it coming out last year, but I was in the middle. I'm an author myself, and we put out a brand new comic book last year around the same time the book was coming out. So it was a blip on my radar to be like, oh, I gotta get that. I gotta get back to that. But I gotta get this comic book printed and published in time for Halloween because we're guests at a comic book store on Halloween. So as an author and a writer, I'm sure you can sympathize with like deadlines, and especially on Halloween, you know, if you're gonna be a guest at a store, it's a big deal. So a few months later, I saw it pop up on my radar again on Amazon of like one of those, hey, recommendations. And I was like, oh my God, I have to order this. And a couple months later, I just ordered it and I'm reading it as fast as I can. And I'm just like, wow, this is different. And then, of course, I started doing some research about you. And I was like, wow, I've known who this guy is most of my life. I just didn't even realize it. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize he wrote Hellraiser 2 and 3 and the Wishmaster movies. That is amazing. And then I reached out to my friend Lito. And now here we are. So you are responsible for a lot of the horror in my life. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, sir. And thank you for the enthusiasm and interest. That's great.
And you,
just to be clear, I originated the Wishmaster movies. I only wrote the first one. The sequels are not mine.
Okay, so here's a question. When they put those movies out, and only the first one was ever in theaters, which, in my opinion, the first one is the best one, I think. I've actually never seen 3 and 4. I've only ever seen 2. I've met Andrew Devoff. I like the guy, but honestly, I never really had an interest in seeing the other ones. I thought the first one was good enough. When they put a film out that says Wes Craven presents, but he's not directing, what does that mean?
Well, how long have you got? That is a credit that can have an infinite variety or array of meanings. In the particular case of Wishmaster, what it meant was that Wes was kind enough to come on board as an executive producer. He didn't produce the movie. The movie was produced by a guy called Clark Peterson, who worked for Pierre David, a name, I don't want to get too inside baseball, but the early Cronenberg movies were produced by Pierre David.
Oh, I thought you said I'm sorry. I thought you said Peter David, the writer of the Incredible Hulk comic books.
No. It would be Peter David if he was a French Canadian.
Oh, okay.
Peter David.
Gotcha.
And he was, as I say, he was Cronenberg's producer in the early days. He had a little production company. It's long-winded. A friend of mine who used to work for New World when I wrote Hellraiser 2 recommended me to Pierre. He put me together with Clark. We made the movie, and Wes came on. You know, I mean, they told me it was because he liked the script. You know, I wanted to believe that, but I suspect because I don't think he came on board until we'd hired Bob Kurtzman to direct it. Just to be clear to your listeners, we're talking about Wishmaster right now, not Hellraiser Bloodline.
Yeah.
Bob Kurtzman was the K in KNB, the premier physical effects shop back then, and still to this day. For instance, the N in KNB is Greg Nicotero, who is Mr. Walking Dead. So that, you know, they're still doing that. But Bob was the K in KNB, and obviously KNB had done effects for Wes in the past, and I think Wes wanted to be able to lend a hand, lend an ear if Bob needed it. So I'd love to say that Wes produced the movie for us and was on set every day with us. He wasn't, but he was very present in post-production, working with Bob on the edit of the movie. That's a précis version for you. Sometimes, just so you know, and I don't want to rain on anybody's parade or make cynics out of any of you, sometimes that presents credit literally means a check has changed hands and we've bought the use of your name. Sometimes that's what that means. It's just you're a name that the public knows. here's a check for $500,000. We're going to put Jim Smith Presents. But Wes, as I say, had an existing relationship. I only met Wes, I think, 3 times in total. Sweet, obviously a huge talent, a sweet man, and was really, a very kind mentor figure to Bob, especially in post-production, as I say. So he didn't just take the money and run. But sometimes you can't always trust that credit. That's the shorthand of what I'm trying to say, Chris.
Gotcha. When you were tasked to write the first sequel to to Hellraiser, what was like Clive's involvement with that? Was there because I know the Hellbound Heart never had a sequel until the 2014 or 15, the Scarlet Letter. So it's was it unusual back then to make a sequel to a movie based on a book that didn't have a sequel? That's a long, complicated question. I don't know the statistics, but I would say no. I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think of the big franchises. Obviously, the James Bond franchises. There were novels. Harry Potter. There were a bunch of novels. But no, I don't think that was the case at all. I think you would get. I wish I had an example to name, but it did not strike any of us as unusual. No, I don't think so. I think there are other movies where the movie became a series or became a franchise without necessarily books going hand in hand with it. But just to wind back and answer the first part of your question, Clive was very involved. Clive and I have known each other since 1974. We used to run a theatre company together in Liverpool, England, and later London. And the third guy involved in that was Doug Bradley, who plays Pinhead in the Hellraiser pictures. So Clive, well, kind of like Wes, like we just talked about with Wes, the producer of Hellraiser 2, was a guy called Chris Figg, who had been Clive's production company partner in Film Futures when they did Hellraiser. So Chris Figg produced Hellbound. But as I say, Clive and I had worked in theatre together for 13 years by that point. So he was busy doing other things, but I don't want to downplay. The basic storyline of Hellbound was knocked out in one drunken evening in Clive's apartment. I went over, he opened a bottle, we sat on the floor and thought, yeah, writing messages in blood on the wall. And, I exaggerate for comic effect, but, so the basic storyline, I mean, Clive didn't write anything down, but the storyline that became Hellbound, he and I jammed on in one evening and then ran it by Chris Figg, who, as I say, was the producer. And Chris, God bless him, said, okay, you're hired, and called New World Pictures, who were the American company that funded it. We shot it in London, in Pinewood Studios, the famous, legendary Pinewood Studios just outside London. But the money was American. It was a New World picture. Recently, there's a book that came out, the original screenplay for Bloodlines in 2021. What would this be? Almost over 20 years since the original film came out? Yeah, 1996. So 25, 6. I'm not doing math correctly.
Yeah, well, you're better at it than me. Well, it's 23 years, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, 1996 to 2021. So.
Okay.
Why did it take so long for something like that to come out? Did it take that long for like copyright and legal red tape and stuff like that?
Oh, no, not at all. It was, yeah. A series of happy accidents, really, as is often the case. And I can tell, obviously, you're significantly younger than I am, Chris, but you probably remember that in the I mean, actually dating back to the 20s, you used to have movie tie-in editions of books, or if a book didn't pre-exist.
By the way, did you know there's a documentary coming out about about the history of movie novels? Yeah,
oh, yes.
Yeah. Is that great?
Absolutely. Jim Coons and Steve Scarlata are doing it, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Unless there's another one, yeah.
No, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. I'm really looking forward to it. I know I've done interviews with Steve and met him, and I know Jim as well. And both of them, or Jim at least, interviewed my friend, sadly my late friend, the great Dennis Etchison, who had novelized, who, as Jack Martin, is a very prized author in the tie-in community, because Dennis Etchison, as Jack Martin, novelized The Fog, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, and Videodrome. So Jack Martin was like a big deal in the tie-in world. So Jim interviewed Dennis before we lost him a few years back.
Right.
So you're fully aware, as I can tell. So the reason the Hellraiser Bloodline book exists is because there was no novelization of Wishmaster back in the day, even though it was still very common then for, it didn't have to be an A-list movie, for B movies to have novelizations. For whatever reason, Wishmaster didn't have one. Cut to 18 years later, or whatever it is, and a guy called Mark Miller, who runs a company called Encyclopocalypse, they began as an audiobook company, but they branched out into ebooks and eventually into paperbacks as well. And they bought up the rights, not bought up the rights, licensed some classic. It's funny when you're my age, you have to go back to something that feels like, 6 or 7 years ago. Classics from the 80s and 90s. And they re-released the novelizations of Fright Night, Reanimator,
yep.
something else. Anyway,
and Reanimator is very funny, considering it's based on a short story, that there's a novelization of a movie of a short story. Life Force.
Oh, there's a whole weird world there, isn't there? Because there's also novelizations of the later James Bond movies.
Right.
Yeah, even though they bear the same title as an Ian Fleming novel on which the movie is ostensibly based, the movies grew so different from the books that they thought, well, screw it, we'll put out a novelization of the actual movie story. So anyway, Mark Miller said, what we're thinking of doing is doing new novelizations of movies that didn't have novelizations. And because Wishmaster was an original, I had the rights to do it. And he said, can we novelize Wishmaster? And I said, sure, knock yourself out. A very talented writer called Christian Francis did the novelization of Wishmaster, and that seemed to go down very well. And Christian has gone on to do Bill Malone's Titan Find, Vamp. He's also done Vamp. And Matt Serafini has done... Damn, should have done my homework before I came on, Chris.
No, it's okay.
Matt Serafini has also novelized a previously unnovelized classic for them. So Mark said to me 6 months or so after Wishmaster had come out and done pretty well, he said, can we do the same with Bloodline? He knew I and many people involved with the movie weren't happy with the finished product. So, he knew he was playing to a foible of mine.
Right.
And he said, can we do a novelization? And I had to say, well, unfortunately, no, because unlike Wishmaster, I didn't create... Well, obviously I created Bloodline, but
yes,
it was an existing literary property
right.
from a very old friend of mine, So not only did I not have the legal right to say you could novelize it, even if I did, I wouldn't have, because as far as I'm concerned, the literary legacy is Clive's, obviously.
Right.
But I thought I was joking, but what I said to Mark was, so yes, I just can't, we can't do it, I'm sorry. You could publish the screenplay if you want, because Writers Guild rules allows writers with, I won't get into the complicated set of bylaws. I was allowed to publish the screenplay. I had publication rights for the screenplay. I didn't think that was necessarily a good idea, because screenplays are not what most people are used to reading. But Mark Miller, God bless him, knew better than me and said, "Oh yeah, we'll do that. Sure. Send us a copy." So for the listeners who haven't seen it or read about it, the Hellraiser Bloodline book looks like any other movie tie-in edition. One of the great things about Encyclopocalypse is they do them in the right size, the little old school rack size that you used to see in spinner racks in newsstands. They do a regular trade paperback size as well. But again, being the age I am, I really like to see those little 5x7 paperbacks. So Bloodline looks like a movie tie-in paperback, but it's not a novelization. It's the actual screenplay.
Now, So I'm up to the present day, which I guess would be 1996 when the movie took place.
Yeah, not so present anymore.
Not
but yeah,
so present
right.
anymore. So right from the beginning of reading the novel, and this is spoilers for anyone who's not seen a 23-year-old movie, sorry. But I'm going to spoil the changes that were drastically made, and we're not going to get into the backstory. We have an entire commentary coming up with me and composer Lito Velasco, which we will get into any information that we know about that we can find online to get into the backstory about why the film changed the way it is, and so on and so forth, and Ali Smitty and all that stuff. But that's a commentary you can listen to in a few weeks. We're here to talk about Peter's work and Peter's biography. So, staying on track, at the beginning of the script in the book, there's no Pinhead, there's no Cenobites, there's just the demonic Princess Angelique, there's the box, and that's it. And, there's a lot of past material. There's no future either. There's no spaceship in space. There's no, let me tell you a story about my great-grandfather who built the box thousands of years ago in, Huffy Puffy, uppity, what was it, France, where they were all basically aristocratic, jerk-offs. Where did it start falling apart where they were like, let's do the future thing in the beginning?
During post-production, as you say, I don't want to get into the weeds on the whole thing.
We're not going to get into anyone's bashing or the Weinsteins or any of that crap. We're not. We're just going to stick to the changes. Yeah, we're just going to stick to the changes. But yes, go into the reasons though, as long as you can keep. Well,
the reasons were that unfortunately, without bad-mouthing anybody. The real director of Bloodline was the great Kevin Yeager, who was a wonderful special effects guy. I will respect your wishes not to badmouth. They cut his legs out from under him. The budget was being sliced on a daily basis. He really got screwed over. Eventually, it got so much that he took the Alan Smithy credit and left. He technically finished principal photography, but there was a whole bunch of effect shots that hadn't been done. But more importantly, when the Miramax tested the movie, they of course tested it not to hardcore Hellraiser fans who I think would have willingly gone with the 40 minutes in pre-revolutionary France before we see Pinhead, but they tested it in a focus group like you do most movies with a whole bunch of people who, might have been familiar with the iconic look of Pinhead from the posters. So they got a lot of notes in the focus groups that said, "Where's the guy with the pins, dude?" So they were also mad as hell at Kevin. They were mad as hell at me because I'd quit because I'd refused to accommodate the slashing of the budget they were doing. So that's why it changed. They wanted to be able to get Pinhead on screen within the first 4 or 5 minutes. I have to say, objectively, and speaking commercially, I can't. I do blame them. Trust me, we all blame them. But it's understandable if they tested the movie and a whole bunch of regular teenagers, which is who they, that's the demographic they're making that movie for. It made them nervous. So now, of course, it's ridiculous because we'd been working on this thing for 8 months. I'd written 5 drafts of the movie. And in none of those drafts did I ever do it differently than first act, 1787 France, middle act, 1996 US, third act, outer space. but they changed that in post-production, and so they broke the chronology. They also, most of the effect shots that weren't filmed and a couple of major sequences, they hadn't filmed because they just didn't have the money to do it.
Program here in WCW. If you're not listening to us. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll always make room for the station ID.
Yeah, no, the interview that I was getting together for my YouTube channel just automatically starts playing after it's finished saving.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
sure.
Right. Go ahead, where you were.
So that was it. Sorry, that was. I should have made that shorter, but
no, that's fine. That's what you're on here for. Tell a story. Tell us a good horrific bedtime story. So besides the, where's the guy with the pins, and we got to do the future. What are three other? We're not going to go through every single one, but what's like three other major changes that you can point out that are in the original script book that people should pay attention to when they watch the movie next time?
Oh God, I've no idea, Chris, because I haven't seen the movie for 26 years, so I can't. I can tell you, I can give you broad strokes. I can give you, the big picture is basically it's the chronology that changes, and it's really what was the first act in the screenplay, as I say, the revolution. Angelique's story with the Duke de Lille and the creation of the box. It was an origin story for the creation of the box, and the bloodline of the title. Yeah, again, I know the people that are familiar with the movie and those who have read the book know this, but the bloodline of the title is the Le Marchand bloodline,
right?
The bloodline of the toy maker who invented the box.
And you set that up, at the end of the third movie too. Sure, your writing to set it up at the end of the third movie with the building with the March artwork everywhere. Okay, so that was already getting set up by you, because when I watched, because I told you this off air, Bloodlines was the very first Hellraiser movie I had ever seen in theaters, and the very first Hellraiser movie I had ever seen in my life. However, I was aware of plot details from the other films, like Christie, and I was so confused by wait, where's the girl that fights Pinhead? Who's the demon chick? And like her and Pinhead have this old Holmes Week relationship where he's like, "Oh, Princess Angelique, it's good to see you again." And I'm like, I missed three other films I need to go back and watch. And then I went back and watched those three films, and I was really still confused about Bloodlines afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, well, it was conceived as both prequel and sequel to the existing three movies. First of all, we never thought we'd get as far as a fourth movie. We didn't think when we were doing Hellbound that we were going to do a Hellraiser 3, because it wasn't as common then for movies to get series. I mean, it was kind of a golden age of character monster movies. We obviously Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. So we were delighted when people liked it enough to let us do more, but it was far from the norm with, middle budget horror movies. So we'd done the three and, really thought that was it. We split Pinhead in half at the end of Hellbound, put him back together in Hellraiser 3. So, like all trilogies, it's kind of, we go on a complicated journey through these three independent narratives, but basically we put the pieces back in order by the end of it, and there we are. So when Miramax said we want another one, Clive and I actually weren't sure what to do. So we conceived it, as I say, originally as a sort of wraparound, as both prequel and sequel to the movies we'd already done. And if you think of it in that context, it would probably make more sense. But certainly the theatrical experience of seeing Bloodline, if you were a Hellraiser fan and had seen Hellraiser 3, starting in a space station was, probably a little confusing. I mean, but It probably would have been just as confusing to start in 18th century outskirts of Paris. So I can't really play that card as a defense.
I understand. What have you been working on? What do you got working on these days? What have you been doing?
Sure. My last produced movie that I wrote was Wishmaster in 1997. I have my name on as a characters created by credit on the Wishmaster sequels. And I continued as a working screenwriter for about another decade. Cause as you know, you can, and it's very sad for people who never get produced, but you can make a living as a screenwriter without the movies actually getting made. So I was still getting assignments. I did several movies. I wrote a movie for Errol Morris. I wrote a movie for Michael Phillips, wrote a movie for Gale Ann Hurd. But I was, before I could be aged out of the industry, I decided to age myself out. And I'd always written fiction as well as movies. So I just concentrated more on that. And I did 2 or 3 novels. But essentially for the last 15 years, I've been a short story writer, which is, let me assure you, no way to make a living. But it is, it's very artistically satisfying. I've had a couple of collections of stories out. And in fact, perfect timing, Chris. Thank you for asking. I have a new collection coming out. Like you were saying about your graphic novel. I'm timing it for Halloween. So I'll have a new collection of stories out, hopefully in time for Halloween. Paperback from Shadow Ridge Press and the ebook and audiobook from Encyclopocalypse. But I've been doing what a lot of writers do, selling stories to magazines and anthologies and whatever.
Fantastic, dude. Thank you so much for chatting with us about, your incredible body of work and all the Hellraiser movies. I'm sure there's like 1,000 more questions we could ask. We are unfortunately at the behest of the Zoom call's time limit. So,
sure.
Where can people find you online if they want to send you praise about the original screenplay and stuff?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm on Twitter as @LimeyBastard55. I'm on Facebook under my own name, and I'm also on Instagram. And I mean, all of those, there'll be, I have a link tree on all the social media things. So from there, you can get to the Amazon author page and the blog and all that stuff. But thank you very much for asking, Chris. And again, thank you for the invitation to be on the show. This is great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was a fan of yours longer than I realized.